Well, we're going to think about dinosaurs here. You ready for dinosaurs? Well, when I was, 6, 7, I went to my first dinosaur fossil museum. My parents brought me in. And have you little guys been, are you 5? Who's 5? 6? 5 or 6? Are you 4? 7. Oh, 7. You're 5? Perfect. When I was just older than you, my mommy took me into the dinosaur museum and she said, come on in. I said, I don't want to go to a museum. There's boring stuff. I want to go play. And she said, well, I'm sorry, you have to go to the museum. And so I said, yes, Mom. So she opened the door and she took me by the hand into the museum. And right there at my level, way down here, was a Tyrannosaurus Rex head with all those big teeth, and I was scared, and I tried to climb up my mommy's arm. Mommy, what is that? And she said, well, let's ask the museum people. And so, okay, protect me from those scary bones, And so we went to the museum people, and my son has a question. Go ahead, Brian. Go ahead and ask the lady your question. What is that? Well, that's a dinosaur. And I was like, I've never seen one of those, like in the backyard, or when did this live? Like, where did it come from? And how did it get here? All these questions, even for a 6-year-old brain, I was asking, where did it come from? How did it get here? And she gave me the answers, did the museum lady. And as we all know, museum docents are experts. They've studied all the literature. I'm being facetious. Yeah, I don't trust everything they say, but I did, and it was a big mistake. She said that's a fossil of a dinosaur, and fossils are rocks in the shape of a bone. There's no original material left. The bone's all gone, because bone can't last millions of years, but this did, so therefore it has to be rock in the shape of the bone. And the fossilization process that converts bone into rock takes millions of years. And this evolved from some reptile into a dinosaur reptile, and then it went extinct. Those were the answers I heard, not just from the museum lady when I was 6 or 7, but it was what I heard in movies. It's what I heard from my parents. It's what I heard at school. It's what I read in the magazines. It's what I read in the textbooks. And it became part of the furniture of my brain. So when I got starting to read Genesis, as you just heard the story. Reading Genesis, going back to the Bible, I thought, well, wait a minute. If Genesis is telling me the truth about where I came from, then where do I fit dinosaurs? And so I came up with 5 dinosaur details that as I discovered them, I started to put the pieces together. And I'm happy to share them with you this morning. 5 dinosaur details that place dinosaurs where they should have been all along, in my mind, within the context of the Bible's history, not some man-made, contrived history that has some sort of age of reptiles. Didn't actually exist, the age of reptiles. I don't believe that anymore. I used to, but I don't anymore. Why? Well, these details reveal why. First one is clever design that I see in the dinosaur anatomy. Anatomy means your body parts and how they fit together. Anatomy. And so I see clever design. And this is the same clever design that Romans chapter 1 talks about when it says, for the invisible qualities of God have been made known through that which he has made. In other words, you see a painting, you know there was a painter. You see a good painting, you know he was a clever painter. You see an engine, you know there was an engineer. You see an efficient engine, you know there was a really clever engineer. And on we go. So this is a basic observation all of us make. Same thing with dinosaurs. You see it cleverly put together, it must have happened by a clever put togetherer. Clever design. It's obvious once we look at it. And so here I am at the museum, Natural History Museum in Denver, taking a picture of one of my favorite dinosaurs. Say it after me, Diplodocus. Diplodocus is a sauropod, which means it's got the long neck, the long tail, and these legs that actually go straight down to support that bulk. And I mean long. So total length, something like 100 feet for some of these. So you could barely fit these creatures in this room. Some of the bigger ones. So anyway, there's Diplodocus. With the highest point on its body is right there at the hip. And the hip is sort of like a pivot joint for this kind of creature. And he could actually take those front legs and raise them up. And he could sit up and he could use his tail as a tripod. And he could reach with that long neck branches, but then he would rear up and reach even taller branches and eat tree leaves back when he was alive, I think before the flood. Anyway, how are you going to construct something like this? What if you used bricks to build the neck? Or concrete and rebar, would that be a good construction material to build this long neck? Okay, thank you. 2 people who are going, I don't think so. The rest of us, we need more jokes, Jeff. Wake us up. No, you don't use bricks. Bricks are going to make his neck fall down, and he'll just be able to eat dirt. That's it. So you got to have lightweight building material, lightweight construction. And in fact, you need to organize and arrange that material in a way that it's got a lot of holes to save space, a lot of gaps. And that's exactly what we see. So we see that. We see this arch shape in the hip, so it can support all that weight is sort of like a teeter-totter, and it's got to have a support, the appropriate support for that big animal. 30 tons, something like that, has to be supported on this hip. And so you have an arch. It reminds me of the man-made arches. Arches with pillars that support weight, definitely man-made here. These are actually like 2,000-year-old Roman aqueduct arches in Ephesus. So Paul the Apostle may have seen these arches. Now that's pretty clever design. No one will look at that and go, the action of the river over millions of years produced these arches. No, you look at that and you go, okay, someone did this on purpose, and they did it so well that it has lasted a long time. And so the same analogy I see with this. Even the knees would grow wider as the animal got bigger. So in other words, imagine building a bridge, but the pillars aren't static. The pillars walk around. A bridge with walking pillars. That's engineering at a whole different level. And as the bridge supports more weight, the pillars get wider. And build you that, Mr. Engineer. So it's not just clever design, it's super, uber clever design that we see in these dinosaurs. And then there's the raised ridges and the hollowed out spaces in these vertebrae. So, okay, everybody point to your vertebra. Show me you know what a vertebra is. Yep. So these are your neck vertebrae here and cervical vertebrae. So these dinosaurs had that. They even had tiny heads to save weight and tiny brains to save weight. The brain the size of a walnut. It's not the size of the brain that made it work, it's the wiring diagram. And so he was able to do everything he or she needed to do to eat those tall branches and do whatever. That's Diplodocus, clever design. And they really recognized this way back in the day, saying that right in the middle there, this is from 1915 description of these dinosaurs. The surfaces are the necessary strengths at all points of strain. And so when I went to the Field Museum in Chicago, and I saw this sign that these secular, atheistic, evolutionary scientists approved, and they said this: sauropods were engineered. They recognize the engineering. Why? Because it's clearly seen. Romans chapter 1, verse 20. Clearly seen. They see it, but if I were to ask them, well, if it was engineered, who did the engineering? And they would say, natural processes. So they have substituted natural processes in for the creator. So they've got a substitute creator. What does Romans 1 say? Well, they worship and serve the created thing rather than the creator. So they're doing exactly what Romans chapter 1 says that unbelievers do. Anyway, so sauropods were engineered. I think, and maybe this is just my weird, wacky theory, that engineering happens from engineers doing the engineering. Because cool stuff doesn't just happen ever in our experience, anywhere. You have to have an engineer make cool stuff, and this was definitely cool stuff. And there's a Brachiosaurus, say that. Brachiosaurus. It's one of these sauropods that's got taller shoulders than it does hips. So here's a brachiosaur on display in a museum in Germany, and it even has these cervical ribs. These are, can you see my mouse? And so anyway, they're like long strings, long bands, and they traveled 1.5 vertebra each. And so what they did is they were stabilizers, so that when he takes a step, if he didn't have the stabilizers, it'd be like plucking a guitar string, and his neck would go, and then he'd try to eat food, and he'd go, I can't find the branch. But instead, he had these automatic stabilizers, and so he would take a step, and it would just stabilize automatically, and without having to spend a bunch of energy to stabilize it. So anyway, clever design throughout. It's like a leaf spring in your car. And then, of course, I think about, this was back when I was young and handsome. Man, you talk about clever design gone bad. It's happening right now. So I'm out there in front of my office with a little bitty hadrosaur named, say it after me, Edmontosaurus. So that's a duck-bill dinosaur, not because it had a duck's bill, but because it had a mouth in the shape of a duck's bill. And then I'm holding a hadrosaur egg that a friend of mine gave me, and it's from China. Okay, so I'm thinking about this egg. These dinosaurs hatched from eggs, and they grew from like this. Even the big ones, even the sauropods, grew from an egg no bigger than a football. So Noah had to take a 100-foot-long sauropod on the ark, right? Mom and dad? No, because they weren't always that big. He could have taken them on when they were only 20 feet long, and they would have fit on the ark just fine. Just by the way, that was free. I'm thinking about clever design, and I'm looking at this going, you know what? If I could build something like this that would hatch from an egg, take ingredients from its environment, construct its own body, and then be able to copy itself. It would be like, when our kids grew up and they were like, I want an iPhone, Daddy. Well, we say, okay, we'll get you an iPhone, sweetie. And honey, can I have your cell phone? And I put her cell phone in the drawer, put mine in the drawer, close the drawer. And a week later, here it is. Here's your baby iPhone. And then you could just watch it grow. And then you have an iPhone for the next generation. Is that how cell phones work? No, not at all. I mean, imagine a self-repairing, self-copying machine. And that's what bodies are. That's what animal bodies are. That's what these dinosaur bodies were. This is engineering at a plane that human engineers can't even conceive of possibly maybe even ever doing at all ever. So who gets the credit? If humans get credit for designing these kinds of things, then something superhuman must receive credit for designing things that do superhuman things. Anyway, so the design level is beyond what we can do, so therefore nature doesn't get credit. The Lord Jesus Christ, the creator of all things, ought to get credit. And that's what we should have believed all along. That's what I should have believed, because it says right there in Genesis 1:25, and God made, not and nature made. It says that God did it. He gets the credit. So as Christians, we ought to start giving him the credit, and it makes the most sense scientifically because of engineering principles. Engineers always do the engineering, and he's the divine engineer. God made the beasts of the earth after his kind. And if dinosaurs don't qualify as a beast, then I don't know what does. So God made them on day 6 of creation week, and it was very good, originally very good. That means T-Rex with those big teeth was originally very good? How could that possibly be? Well, even today, crocodiles have big teeth, and we think of crocodiles as being meat eaters, but some biologists got in the way of that theory, and they actually studied what crocs eat. And they found that 30% of their diet is vegetation, even to this day. So they love watermelons. Maybe T-Rex used those big teeth to eat watermelons in the beginning. And I'm going to head back to this each time, but here's what I started to think after that first dinosaur detail. If I've told you earthly things, said the Lord Jesus to Nicodemus, the Pharisee, and you do not believe, How will I believe if I tell you heavenly things? So in other words, you're looking at the Bible, and it's like Michael Gungor. If he's not going to believe that God created everything, then how's he going to believe the rest of the Bible? And just this week, he made the news again, saying, Jesus is Muhammad. Jesus is Buddha. He's not believing the words because he can't believe the first words. And so we want him to come to this kind of conference so he can learn the science that supports the truthfulness and the historicity of Genesis and of John. So anyway, Jesus is saying, look, Nikki, you can believe the creation part, makes sense. Therefore, you can believe the rest of the Bible because it's all one book. It's all one Bible. It's all one account from the same author, ultimately God himself, the Lord Jesus himself. Okay, that leads me to my second dinosaur discovery, and that's catastrophic death. Oh, it's the sad one. Hope you brought your hankies to dab your tears. So, how do you get a fossil? By the way, fossils don't happen today. I mean, we have dead birds, we have dead reptiles, we have dead mammals, we have all these dead, most of them are just clams, a lot of fish, mostly fish and clams and fish, but they're dead. And so how do you get those? Do clams and fish and other creatures get locked in rock, buried in mud today? It just doesn't happen. This doesn't happen, but it happened in spades at some point in the past. And so here's another dinosaur buried in mud on display at the Carnegie Museum. And if you do like I did and say to someone on the street, can you give me directions to the Carnegie? They'll say, oh, the Carnegie? Whatever. Yeah, the Carnegie. Oh, you go down here and you turn left. However they talk. So anyway, I went down there, turned left, I went to the Carnegie and took my picture of the, say it after me, Camarasaurus. Camarasaurus. It's one of the shorter-necked, long-necked dinosaurs. And by the way, we excavated a Camarasaurus last month from Wyoming, and we got this part right here of one of the legs. It's a big honking bone. Anyways, it was super heavy. So that's fun. But does Camarasaurus show evidence of clever design, or does it look like evolution over millions of years and natural processes and happenstance and random events constructed this creature? Well, looking at the neck in particular, looking at the body, it looks all the parts fitted together, but we're talking about the burial of it, like how did it get buried? And so the scientists did a research project on the neck, and you see how its head is sort of like bent down like this? By the way, it's got the neck arched back, and we see that with any animal, even if it's a bird with any animal with a long neck, its neck is arched back, and that's a typical choking posture. So this one's neck arched back, but right behind his head, it's bent. And so these scientists were trying to figure out, is this how he normally walked around, with this bent, or would it be different? And this was their conclusion. I read this, and I thought, everybody knows this. The postmortem dorsiflexion disarticulated the zygapophyses such that it was preserved in a pose that was unlikely attainable in life. Duh. So then I got a dictionary. And it says, in translation, after he died, something broke its neck. So this is not calm, like every day happening. This is something catastrophic that came through and broke its neck. And that's actually pretty good. Most of the dinosaur fossils we uncover, not only have their heads been broken, but the heads have been ripped off, and the legs have been ripped off and separated, and those legs have been pounded and smashed against one another and crumbled into bits, and then deposited in these layers. Well, let's look at another dinosaur. Say it after me, Compsognathus. Compsognathus. And this is a turkey-sized dinosaur, full-grown. And so these scientists in the National Geographic family book on dinosaurs said this: Compsognathus lived. I've already got red flags going up. Bing, bing. How do you know how it lived? Were you there? How do you know the circumstances? So there's storytelling now, but every time you see past tense, lived, they're telling stories that they don't know because they weren't there. So anyway, close to the shore of a calm lake. Not far from the shore, right close to the shore. We were there, we know. And the lake was calm because we had wind meters in the Jurassic. After death, the animal's body sank to the bottom of the lake, and the calm waters ensured that the bones were not broken up. So, have you been to do you have calm lakes anywhere here in California? Calm lakes? A couple of calm lakes? Ponds? Do you have ponds here? No rain, no lakes. Okay, I'll have to just take my word for it about these lakes. I've been to calm lakes and ponds, and I can assure you that there are no fossils forming in the bottom of them. But do fish die in them? Do turtles die in them? Yes. Are they turning into fossils in these calm lakes? No. What happens to an animal when it dies? It gets eaten. And the parts that don't get eaten rot. And the whole animal carcass is gone in just a few weeks. But that didn't happen to these fish that got buried in these rock layers along with dinosaurs and birds and mammals, all in the same layer. They all got preserved. Not because of calm waters. I mean, calm waters, give me a break. So I looked up some compsognathid type dinosaurs. The one on the left is from Europe. The one on the right, identical anatomy. It's from China, though, so they have to give it a different name, Sinosauropteryx. But it's a compsognathid. And, there it is with the neck arched back, because calm waters do this every time to me. They take my head and smash it against my pelvis. I hate it when that happens. This is not calm. Look at this thing. I mean, draw a chalk outline if you're a policeman and say, the cause of death, totally violent, catastrophic death. Here's another one, neck arched back, catastrophic death. We think this is an extinct, flightless bird there. And here's one. I was at the Museum of the Rockies in Bozeman, and there it is, neck arched back. And the placard says, an agonizing death. And I thought, finally, you guys get it right. It wasn't a calm, everyday death, in the calm waters or anything like that. It was agonizing, yes. And then I read the details on this placard, and if you have really highly evolved peepers, you can read it right there. I'll summarize for you. They said, our scientists did the study on chickens, and we saw that the dead chickens had their necks arched back whenever they choked to death. So we think this dinosaur with its neck arched back was also in a choking posture. And I thought, yes, you got it right. Yes, you got it right. Yes, you got it right. And then they said the reason it was choking is probably because there was a predatory dinosaur clamped on its neck. Oh, you get all that far in your tail and then you collapse. Do you see a predatory dinosaur's jaw clamped on this dinosaur's neck? No. Do you see a whole bunch of mud that turned into rock surrounding the dinosaur? Maybe it was choking on the mud. It's just a theory of mine. Yes, not only this one, but thousands of dinosaurs, thousands of creatures with long necks choking on mud. This is agonizing death, and it's catastrophic, and it's worldwide. We see these kinds of remains around the world. Back to the Field Museum in Chicago, where they have a reproduction of the most famous fossil, certainly the most famous Tyrannosaurus rex, but probably the most famous fossil dinosaur of all time, nicknamed Sue. Sue the T-Rex, named after the discoverer, Miss Sue Hendrickson. Now, on the left, they've got a reproduction where all the bones are repositioned where they were supposed to be in life position, and they've done a great job. And on the right, in the bottom there, you see the actual original head of Sue in a glass box so we can we can examine Sue's head. Okay, so there's a few differences. And so you see the difference on the nose. The nose, let's see. Does my mouse show up there a little bit? So you see this nose bridge is flat, okay, but this is smushed. And then you see this little bit here, the nose, actual nose. And then right there got bumped. Well, what happened? Why did the nose break? So these two hapless, wonderful people, strangers, guy and gal, they're on the other side of the box, and they're reading the placard. And I want to know what the placard says, because that's what scientists do. They read things. So we traded places. And I started reading what it said. And I had to take a picture of it so I could show you guys what the placard said. It says this, crushed nose. I want to know how. Please, do tell. When Sue was found It should say its pelvis because we don't know if it was a gender. We don't know the gender. Anyway, her pelvis was sitting on top of her snout. Okay, hang on. Here's the snout. Here's the pelvis. That's the hips on top. So the creature's upside down and folded in half. Okay. Though it may sound odd, why, yes, it does. Discovering a theropod dinosaur in this death pose is surprisingly common. It's like, well, that means it's even more odd because it's weird here and it's even weirder if it's everywhere else. Anyway, this pose may be caused by muscle spasms. Look, I'm laughing like you, and the two people who had just read this sign and, may have been caused by muscle spasms. Yes, all right. I believe that, and they walk to the other side, and I get to the muscle spasms, and I'm like, muscle spasms, ah! And I'm backing up, and they're backing way up. Because, every time I have a muscle spasm, it just takes my hip and smashes it against my nose and breaks my nose, and I have to reposition it. This is not calm. This is not normal. This is not every day. This is not a natural process. This was a one-off event. This was a unique event that was totally catastrophic, and it buried creatures that were 6 tons, these T-Rexes, and I've got my little selfie with them in different places around the nation, and it's just like a walking bulldozer, and it can go wherever it wants, however it wants, and whatever overtook these creatures, whatever mud overtook them, had to have been flowing faster than they could walk or swim. Otherwise, they would have got out of the way. But the mud was going too fast, and it was too powerful. These creatures weren't strong enough to get out of the way. That's a 7-ton creature, and it's huge. And it's impressive to look at just the fossil. Imagine with its flesh on it. Oh, man, I'm glad I'm not around back then in those wetlands with all those creatures. Anyways, this is catastrophic, and it's exactly what we would expect if Genesis got it right when it talks about the flood. Catastrophic death is what the flood would have brought, and it would have brought it all over the world. And what do we see? Evidence of catastrophic burial in sediments of dinosaurs and all these other creatures on every single continent of the world, including Antarctica. It's worldwide, and it's rock layers, and it's death, and it's catastrophic, and it's just what the flood would have brought. And that's what Genesis 7 says, and the waters prevailed exceedingly on the earth. And so we have these church nurseries with a little Noah's Ark, with the little giraffe and the blue water. It was so fun. This was catastrophic death on a global scale. And we named our son Noah, and we made sure to not have that little dinghy in his room. And we taught him the flood was really a real event, and that's how you get rock layers and fossils buried in them. And those fossils were crushed and spread apart, just like a flood would have done. All the high hills under the whole heaven were covered. And so that's not today's high hills, like the Himalayas and the Rockies. Those formed during the flood. But these are the high hills of the pre-flood world. Those high hills were covered completely with this water, and all flesh died that moved on the earth. Even those dinosaurs that weren't on the ark. That means some were on the ark. 2 of every kind goes on the ark. And that means they would have survived, at least for some time, after the flood. The descendants of those dinosaurs might have lived after the flood and have gone extinct since then. Where would we look for evidence of dinosaurs alive after the flood? Well, we would not look in the fossils, because the fossils record just that flood year. That's right, thousands of feet of sedimentation occurring in just months during that flood year. And we think that all those fossils were deposited in that 1 year of Noah's flood. So you can't look there, because that's a record of the flood. So now the flood and the animals and the plants and mankind is dispersing from the Noah's Ark from the Middle East, and now we're walking on top of all those sediments. And so now we're in today's processes, and those animals, when they die, they're not going to get fossilized like they don't today. They're going to rot and go away. So we look instead at, not in fossils, but at human artifacts. Our our ancestors' records. And that's where we might look, and that's where we looked for the third dinosaur detail. And I'm going to skip this passage here real quick. And that is clashes with dragons. Clashes with dragons. Did our ancestors really clash with dragons? By the way, you're not allowed, according to this placard, to even consider this because it says this. This is a Hill City Museum in South Dakota. No one has ever seen a living dinosaur. By the way, is that a scientific statement? Nope. Because what kind of scientific experiment would you have to run in order to verify scientifically that that statement is true? Answer? Time machine. You'd have to have a time machine to go back in time and interview everyone who's ever lived to verify scientifically that no one has ever seen a living dinosaur. What we know of them comes from fossils. Well, don't look here because you might see evidence of dinosaurs and other extinct reptiles alive after the flood. What about the Chinese zodiac? I remember when I went there to China, we went to the noodle shops and they had like a Gregorian calendar, like our calendar, but then they also had beside it this Chinese calendar. And you've got the year of the, what are these animals? The year of the chicken, the year of the tiger. These are real animals. And then you get to the dragon year, or in Chinese, Long, the year of the dragon. So anyway, this is a really old calendar system, and it may be that whoever invented it millennia ago knew of all these creatures having been alive at that time, at the same time, after the flood. So maybe that's why the dragon's there. What about, this is an Uruk cylinder seal, and they would roll it out. This is from modern-day Iraq. Mesopotamia, and they would roll this out on a piece of clay. It's on display. It's about this big, a little bitty thing. On display at the Louvre Museum in Paris. But they would roll it out on clay, bake the clay, and they'd have this little design there with long necks, creatures with long necks, long tails, and legs that go straight down. Man, spitting image of some kind of sauropod, seems to me. And heard about this on well, not on display, but in a church in England. So when we went to Carlisle Cathedral in England to verify this one, it's a brass decoration about this wide, and it wraps around Bishop Bell's tomb. And his tomb is actually in the middle of the church floor. That's where they buried their deceased pastors. I'm glad we stopped that tradition because that's kind of odd. But parishioners walked on his tomb for hundreds of years, and so it's worn down. That's why you see the two intertwined necks, and the heads are a little bit worn down, but you can reconstruct where those heads were. And so here's the heads, and then anyway, legs that go straight down, long necks, long tails. And if you look to the left of it, you'll see like foxes, and then there were eels and pheasants and just normal animals. And then there's these. Why would they stick fictional animals amidst normal animals when they're decorating Bishop Bell's tomb in 1406, something like that? Is when he passed away. So then I years after I started showing this, I noticed a new detail. It was right here. So this tail of this one, this sauropod, is just smooth, but the tail here has 4 spikes on its tail. And so I asked myself the question, do we know of any actual dinosaur from fossils that was a sauropod that had any spikes on its tail at all? And the answer is yes. In the 1990s, paleontologists uncovered Shunosaurus. Say it. Shunosaurus. It's fun to say dinosaur names. So did they find spikes on its tail? Yeah. How many? 4. So maybe this guy from 1406 jumped into his time machine, went forward into time to the 1990s, and went to the dig site and saw, the 4 tail spikes. They said, I'll do my artwork with 4 tail spikes because now I know what they're going to discover in a few hundred years from now. Went back in time. Is that what happened? There's an alternative explanation that doesn't require a time machine. Maybe he had some kind of first or second-hand knowledge of the creature still having been alive after the flood, but having gone extinct since the 1400s. Now, this is even older than that, and it's got the same behavior even, with the intertwined necks. I think they were maybe headbutting or fighting or something. And this is the Narmer palette. It's Egyptian. It's got the same thing, legs that go straight down, necks intertwined. Here's another one, Chateau du Chambord, and it's got, It's got dinosaurs carved all over it. Well, they drained the swamps. So this used to be like a hunting lodge in the 1400s, 1500s for a French prince. And it was extravagantly, anyway, Chateau du Chambord, look it up. And there's fossils that resemble these. This looks very dinosaurian. Here's Chateau du Blois, and the Blois Valley, which also has Chateau du Chambord in that whole valley, it was once a swamp. It was swampy, and maybe it gave habitat for those big reptiles to have lived there. But today, not so. 1600s, 1700s, they drained the swamps, and they made the place more habitable for more people to live, so then they started farming in those former swamps, and that's how it is today. And has been for several hundred years. Anyway, so you've got Chateau du Blois, and you've got this creature, this big guy, but I don't know of any fossil that it matches. But this little guy here, Maiasaura, I mean, it's a spitting image of what we know from fossils as Maiasaura. How did these artists from so long ago depict with such anatomical precision the dinosaurs and other extinct reptiles that we know of today? Here's another, speaking of other extinct reptiles or reptile-like mammals. Did you know there's a whole class or group called mammal-like reptiles? They all went extinct in the flood. Or maybe like dinosaurs, a whole class of reptiles called dinosaurs. Maybe the mammal-like reptiles, they survived the flood too on Noah's Ark, representatives of them, and then they went extinct after the flood also. But that means they would have lived after the flood for some time. Well, here's the tile mosaic of Palestrina, so that's in Italy, and this was 100 BC. Artists did this with little bits of tile, and they're showing what's happening on the Nile River, on the opposite side of the Mediterranean Sea. And you've got all kinds of different creatures here, including this one, where it's got these big tusks, and it's even named in Greek letters, leopardalis, anyway, crocodile-like and leopard-like. So it's mammal-like. Anyway, it looks like a mammal-like reptile that we know from fossils. And in particular, Gorgonopsid has the big tusks that we know from fossils. And there it is, and it's making these natives restless. And so maybe that's what that came from. Skeptics say, no, it was a crocodile. But then you look down at the same tile mosaic, and you've got actual crocodiles. So the artists they knew exactly what they were doing back then. And just the last one, maybe a few more. This is just the tip of the iceberg. We have resources that give you more of this kind of evidence. For example, the best one I know of is called Dire Dragons. It's a book that we sell. You have to order it. We didn't bring it with us. But Dire Dragons has a lot more of this kind of evidence of our ancestors having interacted with extinct reptiles, including dinosaurs, like this one in Ta Prohm, Cambodia, and it's at a temple and covered with jungle. And someone uncovered it some years ago and found, okay, you got a bull, a parrot on this temple column, and then you have this creature with these big plates on its back. And what does it remind you of, maybe? Looks pretty steggy to me. Pretty steggy. Clashes with dragons reminds us of we're not just defending, Genesis, but Jesus says if you don't believe the earthly things, like the creation of the earth, supernatural creation, or the flooding of the earth, if you don't believe the earthly things, then how are you going to believe if I tell you the heavenly things? Another earthly thing that I think Jesus would challenge us to start believing is what it says in Job. Look now, says God to Job, at the behemoth, which I made along with you. So we've looked at what was behemoth? And his strength is in his hips, and he moves his tail like a cedar. And so my Bible translator's notes say, maybe it was a hippopotamus. So I went to the zoo to look at the hippo tail. And I thought, does the hippo tail remind me of a cedar tree or any tree? And then I watched the hippo. They just sit there in the water for hours. And finally, the hippo eased up onto the land, and he used his tail to do something I wish I could unsee, but complete with total sound effects, he fertilized the yard. With this little flap-like tail. And I thought, that's not a tree. Nothing like it. So I'm glad that I don't have to trust every Bible translator note. I can content myself with trusting the actual words of God. Because what I think is this: behemoth best matches a dinosaur. In fact, to me, it seems a good match for something like a diplodocus, with its strength is in its hips, where it could hinge on those hips like a teeter-totter, and he has a tail like a cedar, which is like a tree, and it could stand straight out. But that means dinosaurs would have been alive after the flood, and God is talking about one of them, and he's making the point, see how big and awesome this creature is? And it says it's the chief of the ways of God. I think that means it's the biggest, baddest creature I ever made and put on land. How much bigger am I? I'm the only one who can approach it. They had these whip-like features at the end of their tail, and they could use their tail as a whip. So all you have to do is turn around and use that whip to keep any predator or threat at tail's length. But God is not limited to that. God can approach it where man can't. Anyway, so it fits. It fits. Behemoth being a dinosaur alive after the flood. Wow. And so we talk about that, and more evidence of that in some of our books and materials that we brought with you today. I'll tell you about some of those. Okay, last two. So how far have we gone so far? Created, not evolved. Check. Because the anatomy shows this clever design. And then catastrophic burial. So clever design. Is that what it was? And then catastrophic death. Not normal everyday death, so that fits the flood. So creation is confirmed by the anatomy. The flood gets confirmed by the rock layers and how extensive they are and how torn up the bodies are, and with the necks arched back and flooded, okay? And then we looked at the evidence from human artifacts showing that these dinosaurs were alive after the flood. That's what we'd expect. But can we really, with scientific confidence, affirm what the Bible teaches about this flood having been recent? So the last two dinosaur details have to do with the recency, thousands, not millions, of the flooding. So if the flooding happened, then would it still have collagen? Yes, thousands of years. Collagen is shown here on the top there with every little bubble represents an atom. So collagen is what? It's what makes up your skin. It's also in your bones. It's what makes it's like the rebar in concrete is your collagen that's in your bones. And we've done decay rate studies showing that it can last, in theory, hundreds of thousands of years. So it can last a long time. As we know from the Dead Sea Scrolls, which are a couple thousand years old, and they're made of what? Sheepskin, which is pure collagen. It's like 99% collagen. Protein. So this protein can last a long time, but it cannot last 1,000,000 years under ideal circumstances. And so that's what the lab bench decay reports give us. Boy, imagine my thrill when I saw the actual T-Rex skull that was attached to the femur from which they got these tissues and published these images in 2005 in the journal Science. That picture right there with the connective tissue, it's still flexible with the blood vessels, and they said, we got this out of a T-Rex. And I thought, you got to be kidding me. That looks so fresh. I could eat it. And then the scientific community at large said, no way that could have come from your T-Rex. You must have dropped your lunch into the test tube. And so literally a friend of mine asked the curator at the Smithsonian, that's what his theory was. Dropped the lunch into the test tube. I think your theory is a bunch of baloney. So the scientific community said, we don't believe it. So the scientists who did this went to a different country, got a different dinosaur from a different rock layer, and they found more of the same. This is from hadrosaur femur, same material. Blood vessels, bone cells, osteocytes, and what look like erythrocytes or red blood cells, they're inside blood vessels. Bacteria don't make anything like this. So I was at the LA County Museum, and this is on display there, and I didn't know it was going to be, but I had already studied this report where the scientists had looked at this extinct marine, that means ocean, reptile called, say it after me, mosasaur. Mosasaur swam like a shark, but they said there's this red patch, you can see it right here, red patch in its rib cage right there. And they said, we tested why this is red, and we couldn't find any magnet that would have attracted iron filings, because iron is red. But we did find evidence of hemoglobin decay products. So it still has hemoglobin in it, and that's why it's red. And so this is me pointing to it and jumping up and down and, interacting with fossils as scientists are supposed to do. Look, guys, look, it's still colored red. It's still bloody. It looks recently deposited. And then everyone, once again, for some reason, just walked away, backed away. All those pedestrians, those poor people. Yeah, it's fun to go to museums with me. Just keep your distance. T-Rex tissue there. Triceratops tissue, red blood cells. There's collagen fibers in this claw that's been sitting in a drawer in the British Museum for 100 years, but it was extracted from Canada. And we have 116 more examples of this. It's not just one T-Rex, it's all over the place. And it might be in the fossil that you have that Grandpa gave you that you're using as a doorstop. But so collagen decay is so rapid, it's so fast, it can last thousands but not a million years, and so that gives us scientific confirmation of what we already knew, what we already were told all along, and that is that God flooded these creatures thousands of years ago. And it reminds us of what we should have been thinking, when Jesus said this to the Pharisees in Mark 10:6. And Jesus said this, "But billions of years after the Big Bang beginning, God made them male and female." Oh, wait, I misquoted it. But from the beginning of creation, right there. Beginning of creation, God made them male and female. Who's the male and female? Adam and Eve, right there at the beginning. And the two shall be one flesh. So he's quoting from Genesis chapters 1 and 2 directly as though they are history, actual history, and they are. And by the way, those first two chapters have no contradictions in between them. They complement one another, but they're written by different perspectives. So anyway, from the beginning, right there at the beginning, you got male and female. And so recent creation, recent flood, thousands, not millions. That's what the Bible teaches. That's what collagen in these fossils demonstrate, and that's what radiocarbon, I should have this called radiocarbon decay, but then I couldn't keep with the CD alliteration, so we'll call it carbon decay for short. But radiocarbon is a radioactive isotope or version of carbon, and it decays, and its maximum shelf life is 100,000 years. I mean, that's extra max. So 100,000 years, in theory, after that amount of time, in theory, you would have no radiocarbon left. You would have, it all turns into nitrogen spontaneously, just turns into nitrogen. So if we find radiocarbon, let's say, in this dinosaur bone that we sent to the radiocarbon dating laboratory, we have confidence that it's thousands, not millions of years old. So there it is. It's a hadrosaur caudal vertebra, tail vertebra, and we cracked it in half, and we extracted bone material from the middle, sent it off to the lab, and they came back with the lab report. I can show you the report. And it says, look, we got radiocarbon. We found the left brow horn core. Let me say that again. The left eyebrow, Triceratops, it has 3 horns, 2 that are eyebrow horns, they're brow horns. Anyway, the left eyebrow horn core. The core is the bone part around which the horn would have grown. And anyway, so we got a sample of brow horn from Triceratops, sent it off to the lab, and guess what they found in our Triceratops? From Cretaceous rocks that are assigned a circular reasoning-based age of 90 million to 70 million years from this rock layer, and it came back with radiocarbon in it, which makes it look like it's thousands, not millions of years old. Other scientists have found keratin still stuck to the outer surface. Keratin, that's the material that horn is made out of, the actual horn on the outer surface of the bone. So we have tissue and radiocarbon in the same kinds of fossils. I even sent some of this into the lab from Diplodocus, from the Carnegie, and it's stained dark because of the minerals that have gone into the bone during the flood and after the flood. And I thought, there's no way that this is going to have any radiocarbon, anything original left, because it's so stained. But sure enough, we got radiocarbon in that also, and in, say, Stegosaurus. Found it there, found it in this one. Oh, this is fun to say. It starts with the letter P, but it's pronounced Psittacosaurus. And that's from China. So we found it in all these different... we thought maybe the fossils in the western U.S. are the problem. Maybe we can go for a fossil from somewhere else. Maybe it won't have radiocarbon. Maybe it's the wrong lab, so we use 3 different laboratories. Maybe it's the wrong sample, so we send them in multiple times. And we've done all kinds of research. And this is consistent with what we found in prior research, where we found radiocarbon, which is young looking. It's like finding a candle still burning when you walk in the room, and it looks fresh. And we found radiocarbon in coal that's supposed to be 200 million years old, and in diamonds that are supposed to be 3 billion years old, B like banana. And so when you find radiocarbon, there's nothing that has carbon that doesn't also have radiocarbon. And so we found it in natural gas, marble, and this is not just creation scientists doing this, we're just verifying what evolutionary scientists have found. All that to say this, carbon decay verifies it's recently deposited. So we think of this, Mary, the mother of Jesus, Zechariah, the father of John the Baptist, he said this in Luke 1, "Blessed is the Lord God of Israel, for he has visited and redeemed his people, as he spoke by the mouth of his holy prophets, who have been around since billions of years after the Big Bang began." Who have been around since the world began. So we have his holy prophets right there from the beginning. Jesus referred to Abel as a prophet. And so we have Adam recording his portion of Genesis, signing his name to it. This is the book of the generations of Adam. Anyway, so these prophets have been around since the beginning, and that's thousands, not millions of years ago, and science supports that, actually. So this is all this to bring this to a close. This is the life-transforming part of it. This is where I thought, okay, I can now trust you when you talk about earthly things. When you talk about the creation, it really happened. When you talk about the flood, it really happened. And because I can trust you about the earthly things that are in your book, I can trust you about the spiritual teachings that are in your book, like I'm a sinner. That's true too. If you're telling me the truth about where I came from, well, you're telling me the truth about my sin. My sins earned the death penalty. That's also true. And it's also true in this book, you tell me about someone who was innocent died in my place. That's the Lord Jesus Christ. That's also a true teaching, a heavenly thing that's in this same book. And so what does it say there? If you say with your mouth, Jesus is Lord, and believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead, you will be saved. And I can be saved from the death penalty, from my own sins and their consequence. And so these heavenly teachings tie into and are part of the earthly teachings, the historical parts of the scriptures. And we can trust all that. Well, you can get all this reaffirmed and confirmed if you visit us in Dallas at the Discovery Center. And of course, avail yourself of the resources that we have today. So the National Geographic dinosaur book for families that I showed you, that's a bunch of junk. So we thought we'll make one that's scientifically responsible and biblically respectful. And so Guide to Dinosaurs is here. Dinosaurs and Man is a DVD we have. I wrote this little booklet, Dinosaurs in the Bible. I think we've sold like 40,000. It's pretty good. But it's because it's short, and people go, I can read that. And so I got a lot of compliments on that, which is nice. But really, we do this so that people will go, wait a minute. Is there really science out there that supports Genesis, or is it all just what I've been told in the mass media? So this is... some of the details I've been sharing today are in this book, Dinosaurs in the Bible, little booklet. We also have Guide to Creation Basics. I think every Christian family ought to have this because it's got pictures on every page. So when your kids are like 10, they go, ooh, look at this picture, and they read the caption for that. But when they're 15, they go, I have a serious question, and they go and read the rest of that page. And then mom and dad learn something from it too. And then if you're going into college or know someone who's going into college, you're going to get asked these questions, and you're going to have these doubts. And what about radiocarbon dating? And what about other kinds of radioisotope? What about the Ice Age? What about the Big Bang? What about? We've dealt with all the biggest whatabouts, and we put them all in one book called Creation Basics and Beyond, and we have that here for you today. And if you buy these books, they come with free cellophane wrappers on those. We also encourage you to go to sign up for our free monthly magazine, Acts and Facts. It also comes with a subscription to our daily devotional, Days of Praise, free. We want to connect you. We want to equip you with confidence that you can trust God's word from the very first verse. Thanks.